and some other team members that I will introduce to you down there at Civic Hall. We have Leland Kester, our wastewater services manager. Chip Alstead is our project engineer in our engineering division who's been helping with this analysis. And Chip's also involved with our wastewater projects and the master plan. So thanks, Chip, for all your help with that. And then Deb Gallardi, I think most of you know Deb. She's our consultant helping us with the analysis. And she's also helped us with wastewater rate studies in the past, several wastewater rate studies, I believe. So thanks, Deb. Sorry I'm not there to meet you. So tonight we're going to be talking about stormwater utility fee. I'll refer you to the packet for the staff report, which includes some background information about the need for additional funding for stormwater activities, storm sewer maintenance, and regulatory requirements. And just to clarify, what we're looking at is forming a new stormwater utility, which is separate from the wastewater utility that we already have in place. So this would be a new utility that would be formed. So I'll start with a presentation and walk through the needs for this funding and then hand it over to Deb to finish up the presentation. And Deb can discuss more of the details of the analysis that we're working on. And just to be clear, we're not asking for any action tonight. We just wanted to give you an introduction on where we are with this analysis and get some initial feedback and answer any questions you may have. And then we'll be coming back with another work session once we've completed the analysis. So I can see that you can see my screen. So I'm seeing yours in the background there. So there's two studies that are underway right now. One is the stormwater utility analysis, and we're also working on the wastewater master plan. So I was going to also touch on the wastewater master plan this evening because we're proposing to create a committee that will cover both the stormwater utility analysis and the wastewater master plan, since there is some similarities to both of these studies. First, I just wanted to mention that what we're working on is in line with the city goals and values from the MacTown 2032. Environmental stewardship is one of the important values of the city. And we are responsible caretakers of our shared public assets and resources. And also one of the council goals is to create and implement an environmentally sustainable and/or climate action plan. So the stormwater utility that we're proposing would help us meet these goals. Some limitations relative to the stormwater system to meet these goals is lack of sufficient and sustainable resources. To meet ongoing operation of the stormwater system, to meet a capital improvement plan for rehab and replacement of the stormwater infrastructure rather than just reactionary replacement, which is where we're at today, and compliance with expanding regulatory requirements, which I'll talk about here in a sec. So at one, we've had a work session about the TMDL, the mercury total maximum daily load. So this is a new-ish requirement. Our plan for it was approved last year by DEQ, and we have 5 years to implement this. And this is an effort to reduce mercury load in the water system. So some of the items that are required for this implementation include public outreach, which we're working on now, new ordinances which will be coming, ongoing staff training on an annual basis, additional inspections and tracking annually, a guidance document that we still need to put together, and then ultimately a local erosion control permitting program and enforcement, which obviously all of this requires additional staff time. Other regulatory requirements that may be coming soon are the municipal separate storm sewer system permit, or MS4. This is authorized by the Federal Clean Water Act as part of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or the NPDES. Currently, McMinnville does not have an MS4 permit, but it's possible that we will be required to address this permit in the near future. It's required for cities over 100,000 population or at the discretion of DEQ. So obviously McMinnville is not near 100,000, but DEQ can at its discretion require the permit to smaller cities, and it has done that in our area. So we expect this potentially in the next 5 years, which would add to the requirements similar to that TMDL, but It focuses more on stormwater management and flood regulations and detention water quality. And then spill prevention and response, ongoing water quality monitoring, and development of construction standards for enforcement. Again, this would all require, additional staff time. So what is a stormwater utility? It's an enterprise fund dedicated to meet stormwater operating and capital needs. Very similar to what we have set up for the wastewater. It establishes rates based on use of the stormwater system, provides an equitable distribution of costs, which we believe is very important, reduces demands on wastewater and the street funds, which are what we're using now currently to fund these efforts related to stormwater, provides a stable resource ongoing, improves community safety and reduces risks during flooding by keeping our storm sewer in shape, and protects rivers and creeks from pollutants and sediment. Just a quick update then, like I mentioned on the wastewater master plan, currently we're working through the technical analysis. Flow monitoring is complete. We're working on projected flows. Determining regulatory compliance is also in progress, and then we'll be developing a capital improvement plan for wastewater with that. And then there will be some policy decisions that will be coming to you all for regarding updating the rate structure, and Deb will be helping us with that as well. And also updating the sewer SDCs. We have a public engagement outreach plan for both the stormwater and the wastewater projects that we're working on. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we are planning to form one project advisory committee that would cover both of those, since there's a lot of similarities and overlap. So we're looking at a 9-member committee, which would include 5 residential community members, and then 1 representative each from industrial, commercial, institutional, and development. So we'll be putting out an advertisement for that, hopefully very soon. And we'd also ask that the council consider appointing a council member as a liaison with the committee. And if we need to bring that to a council meeting, please let me know. We can do that as a more formal action if needed. So things that we'll be doing with the outreach are posting on the city websites, including information in the city newsletter. We'll do a newspaper article, public meetings, of course, contacting community groups directly, like the affordable housing group. And again, as I mentioned, city council work sessions for both the stormwater and the wastewater master plan. With that, I'll hand it over to Deb.
Thanks, Ann. Deb Ghilardi, Ghilardi Rothstein Group. I'll walk through the 4 primary elements of setting up a stormwater utility. As Ann talked about, about the need for it. And this is more about the process for development, which is similar in some respects to the process that you went through most recently for the city services fee. And it functions like the wastewater utility rates and charges as well, being an enterprise, another enterprise of the city. So the elements are the legal, there's a legal component. Obviously, you need to change code, adopt fees by resolution, and set this up as a separate entity or a separate enterprise within the city. There's a financial planning element to estimate the near-term and the long-term revenue requirements associated with the system. And then as you went through with the city services fee, determining what's an equitable and defensible rate structure of how to charge different types of customers for the services that they receive, and balancing that against the administrative costs associated with the fees. And then the administration, the support system, this is going to require changes on the billing system, customer service as the new fee is set up, accounting systems to track that new dedicated funding source. Next. So in terms of the legal framework, dozens of Oregon cities have implemented stormwater fees. The city has the authority to do this as part of its general powers. And there is case law specific to support stormwater fees as that came out of the 1993 Roseburg decision that was specifically related to stormwater, that established stormwater fees are fees for service, a specific service, and not a general property tax. As I said, the local authority, just like you do with your wastewater rates, adopt the fees by resolution. And so the code changes that Ann was talking about with respect to the stormwater program, the mechanism for charging the fees will also be part of that bundle. Just to give you a sense of the range of fees, this gives you a sample from other Oregon communities. And of those who charge the fees, they can range upwards of $30 or more per month. And it really depends, and this is specific to stormwater service. So this is separate from the wastewater fees and other utility fees that the cities have. This is just for the stormwater services. And the wide range really reflects where the cities are in their, how mature of a program they have, what their regulatory requirements are. Do they have an MS4 permit requirements? And the extent of their perpetual maintenance of the capital, and to some extent, whether they're a growing community and things like that. So just like with wastewater rates, it's hard to, comparisons can be misleading because there's so many different factors that influence the local conditions and the rates.
Director Pagano, I think we have a question.
Sure.
It was more for Deb, but of the last slide that you just showed, is there a way to identify which ones of those are managing an MS4 permit, and which ones are just kind of using it for road maintenance and kind of what we're outlining initially using it for here in the city?
Well, I think, I'm not familiar with all of them in terms of their regulatory requirements. I know we know Newburgh, because I've been working with them for years, they have been phasing in their rates and are our understanding meeting the typical requirements of an MS4, but don't currently have that permit requirement. Is that right, Leland?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I think, do you happen to know which other ones are?
I do not.
Yeah.
That's something we can look up. And
We can
get back
definitely
to you on that.
Yeah, I can follow up with you on that, Councilor Garvin. You can find it all on the DEQ website. They have a list of all the MS4 permits. I know Lake Oswego does, and Oregon City and Wilsonville for sure, but I'm not sure about the rest.
And what triggers what triggers a state to say McMinnville needs to do an MS4 even though we're well under the 100,000? Is it
Right.
industrial space
yeah.
that's developed, or certain commercial uses we have in town, or what are they looking for? What triggers that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't know that I have the answer to that. I would probably need to follow up with DEQ and find out how they decide, when that's going to be required.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to know that.
Yeah. It's just, my understanding is at their discretion, but there must be some, requirements there. So I'll follow up with you on that too.
I have a follow-up question on that slide as well. Deb, you mentioned program maturity as well. Again, kind of off the top of your head, do you know the maturity of some of these?
Let's see. I think the only one I can really speak to is Newburgh, because I've been working with them for years, and they started out with basically just recovering, moving off of a shared funding system to a dedicated fee and building staff, starting with staffing capacity in the rates and then moving on to capital improvements. So they had a very incremental approach to building their funding. Oh, it's.
And we can see your screen.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Well, James has some information, I think, that he can help us out with.
Sorry, I was trying to be covert there.
Sorry.
James, city engineer. The MS4, to the population question, I don't think they only look at the city's population, but they're looking at the population of the community. And so they would probably lump us in with the surrounding urban area. And so we might be a lot closer to that, say, 100,000 threshold than what the city population may indicate. That, and then they're also looking at potentially the impact of any streams we are discharging to, how that may impact the ecology of the local area. And so the EPA and DEQ really at their discretion could really next year require McMinnville to get an MS4. We anticipate, given how they've been reacting to other communities, there's a very good chance we'll need it within the next 5 years, would be my guess.
We have some additional questions.
Do you have any idea what the capital outlay is going to be? You're talking about the mercury limits, and then I'm assuming there's going to have to be some additional filtration or whatever that has to happen with this. Do you have any idea what the overall capital costs are we're looking at? What time range
That's
we're
a good
looking
question.
at?
We've
then?
started working on that, but it's still in progress. And so that'll be part of what we'll present at the next work session when we have more information on those costs.
When you present for the capital outlay, we also break down like what it would cost to maintain our pavement index, what it would cost to bring that up to the next level, and kind of those things that.
Yeah, what's the
we've
progression
identified.
level of what we have to do for the capital expenditures?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. So about the pavement index?
So one of the things you guys mentioned is you could do road maintenance with this, correct, or no?
Oh, right.
So what, best case scenario, kind of what we would need fee-wise to maintain our road system or bring it back to where it was PCI level, 5 years ago before it started deteriorating, because we're kind of on the backside of that bell curve now.
Gotcha.
And then capital outlay for new capital, and
What
kind of what
time
the
frame?
plus and minuses on a fee, and where the dollars and cents kind of land on those expenditures.
When you do the sewer fees, you usually have like a certain amount of time that you're expecting that you have to do a major sewer installation. And so you are able to kind of present value that up to that point in time to be able to pay for it at the time without paying interest charges. So are you going to do something like that for us?
Yes, however, that's going to be a phased process. So we need to update our stormwater master plan. And with that, we would be doing a capital improvement plan. But that's, going to take a couple of years to do. So our intent would be to set this up to start and then do the stormwater master plan and kind of reevaluate the fees as we go along. We can we can put some placeholders in there because we know about some things that we need to do for capital projects based on previous work, but there will probably be more, discovered during that master planning process.
Okay, thank you.
And just to come back to the question about the maturity and where these other cities are, a number of these cities are served by clean water services, so they're part of the regional utility, which has had a stormwater program for decades. And they then, so like Tigard, Sherwood, Cornelius are all part of that, which are on the upper end. So they are cities that both have a regional, they pay in as part of the regional district, but then they also have their local costs that they have to meet. And so that's why I think you're seeing them at the higher end, plus, as Leland said, Lake Oswego and the other city you said, which already had, Milwaukee, that has those requirements. So that's one of the reasons for that group that's on the upper end of this range, why their rates are higher. Okay, Ann, I think we can move on to the
Okay.
next one. So we will be, as Ann said, developing, looking at all of the revenue requirements that are needed to support this utility. And that will include the operation and maintenance administrative costs, as well as the capital improvement plan, which will be identified as part of the stormwater master planning process. But we know, so the general components of any capital improvement plan are going to be needed upgrades to existing facilities, perpetual life maintenance, and expansion. Once this utility is put in place, in addition to the user fees or the monthly rates, you can also then look to develop a systems development charge to pay for the growth-related aspect of the stormwater system. So that's can be one of the next phases once that stormwater master plan is put in place. Next slide. So generally, with these types of, when a stormwater fee is implemented, the goal is to move from this shared maintenance and funding where it's competing with other, needs, transportation needs, or wastewater funding needs, to have its own dedicated funding source so that you can meet the near-term regulations, the TMDL that Ann talked about, and future regulations coming down the road. We know there'll be some, we just don't know exactly what the timing will be. And then to begin doing capital investment to avoid kind of the reactionary emergency situations that you've been facing. Once the full master plan is put in place, then we can estimate what the longer-term capital plan is, and just as we do for wastewater, when we look at 10, 20 years out, show how you need to maintain the rates and phase in rate increases so that you can continue to pay as you go. The city's done an excellent job in its infrastructure system of planning for those large investments by maintaining and building reserves to fund those. Once that master plan is put in place and you have a better sense as the priorities and the costs associated with those, then a longer-term funding plan can be put in place, which would include systems development charges most likely also. Okay? So how we determine the revenue requirements at this stage is going to be looking, at some of those environmental regulatory requirements and identified what a lot of those are and how they relate right now, mostly to staffing. Although there's the ongoing street sweeping that's part of maintaining, addressing water quality issues and just, safety and asset management preservation issues. This table, which is a little bit small print, but it just shows from a recent survey what many utilities are funding with their stormwater fees. So it includes the street sweeping and water quality monitoring. Public education is often a requirement as part of these regulatory requirements, inspections, erosion, sediment control, all those sorts of things. Once we identify the revenue target that we're trying to achieve through the stormwater fees, then we start looking at the rate structure. And here we're looking to balance equity and fairness with the simplicity and the ability to implement at a low cost. As you know from the other utility systems that under rate best practices, we charge in proportion to use of the system. Stormwater, like wastewater, is not metered. With wastewater, we estimate customer use of the system with basically their winter water use that returns to the wastewater system. For stormwater, it's also generally flow-based, but it's impervious surfaces that cause the need for stormwater management generally, and also stormwater quality and quantity. Those hard surfaces that don't allow infiltration of stormwater into the ground creates issues for the city's safety, environmental issues that the city then needs to build infrastructure to manage. So impervious area-based charges are the most common, as well as, in some cases, some account-based charges to recover just the general administrative billing costs that go along with having a utility and a charge. Okay, next slide. This slide just, again, shows some survey information from a stormwater survey that showed that 89% of the utilities charge in proportion to some, form of measurement of the parcel. And the majority of those is based on the impervious area because of that impact, causes additional impacts on the system. For residential customers, the majority, and 66% in this national survey, use a uniform charge for all residential customers. So it's a flat fee. In some cases, as the city revenue requirements grow and the bill starts to increase, there are some cities that will come up with a tiered fee that is based on the size of the parcel. But generally, for the initial stage of the utility and the general uniformity within the residential class, a uniform fee is equitable, defensible, and balances the administrative requirements. For non-residential customers, you can imagine the range of sizes in terms of impervious area is sufficiently large that it makes sense to invest upfront in estimating those parcel sizes so that one can be charged fairly.
Could you go back? You said that using a flat rate on all residential is equitable. Can you explain how that plays out? Because especially at the rates we looked at on the screen, right, $15 a month, that can be very high impact for some households and very low impact for households. So could you explain how a flat rate is equitable?
Yeah, it's when you look at the residential class and you consider that, and I think in your packet was some information that showed a sample of residential customers and their impervious area. And most of the residential customers are within a pretty tight range of measurement. You get some outliers on the low and the high end, but there is sufficient uniformity that it's accepted practice to charge a uniform rate. Again, it's definitely a policy decision, and all of these different objectives need to be weighed when considering the best structure for the local jurisdiction. So is it equitable, is it defensible, understandable to customers, implementable, which is one of the main hurdles to getting too complicated initially with these types of fees. There's lots of residential customers, and to measure every one of those is a timely and can be an expensive undertaking. So, but again, it's the local jurisdiction that needs to weigh, what is the right balance, to strike that balance for where you are going to start with your fee and make those decisions. But the majority of utilities in Oregon charge a uniform fee for residential nationwide. That's also the case. You can see 66%. But when we look nationally, we see a lot more diversity of fee levels as well because of different regulations in different states and things.
Okay, and then I had one other question. I haven't quite wrapped my mind around here. We talked about this mandate coming down, we were looking for at the beginning of the conversation, some clarity on what exactly triggers the
MS4 permit.
Yeah. And one of the comments was that it's kind of all users of the system, not just, there was a comment about it being all users of the system, but of course what we're talking about is something that, and as described in your packet, we would most likely be asking Water and Light again for partnership on their billing system. I was wondering also if any of those conversations had started, but you know, then that's really looking at a much more narrow scope of folks, right? Because they have to be Water and Light customers in order to be receiving that bill in the first place. And so I was just wondering if you could touch back on that a little bit about who is, how we're affected, and who we're discussing billing, and if we're talking about billing a smaller set of people, then when really the problem we're trying to fix is, or what we're trying to plan for is that applying to a much larger audience than who is paying for it? I'm sorry, it's a little, I can't quite get the question out the right way, but I think you hear where I'm going.
Did you want to address that?
Yeah, could I jump onto that and just say, how are you going to parse that? I mean, I'm assuming Water and Light's going to have to be part of this decision. So I'm just kind of curious to how they will make that determination.
I know several years back, Mike Bissett started that conversation with Water and Light that we were going to need a stormwater fee. This was coming, and they understood that, and even when the city services charge started, they still have the stormwater fee as something on their books to work on. So
We've had discussions about it recently, just very briefly, but they know we're in the process of doing this and that it's something we're going to be asking them.
Okay, and then what about the demand versus the input versus the output? All of the TMDL numbers being affected by this many people and asking this many people to pay for it. Can we talk about that?
Basically, this would basically be billed by Water and Light and would be all their customers in the system for us, for McMinnville. So I'm not sure of who else we would
I
be.
think what Mayor Drapkin's talking about is the engineer that jumped on shared that not just the 100K mark isn't just McMinnville proper residents, it's a larger area in general, and so I took that as also our rural customer base that's not really city taxpayers, and we have no authority to levy this fee on, and so
Right.
we're being
And
held.
James is still on, and I believe that the MS4 permit would only be for our city. I think
That
James
is
was
correct,
saying-
Ann.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I was speaking to is, and if you go on to Oregon.gov and you read more about the MS4 permit, they have it right on their website that the 100,000 population cutoff is related to designated urbanized areas. And so they wouldn't just look at within the city limits, but that really just triggers when they may implement it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all those people within that urbanized area, their stormwater would be flowing to our system. But they would give McMinnville, usually the largest city within that urbanized area, they would receive the MS4 permit requirement. And so just because we may have some neighbors, that may trigger us to get an MS4 permit earlier than we would than our population would require. But it would be our responsibility to make sure our system met their requirements.
And do they list on there for populations, like, I don't know if Redmond's on there as a MS4, but they're not 100,000 either. So do they list on there if, say, Redmond is MS4, why they were categorized as that? Is it their proximity to the Deschutes River, or
They do
salmon
not list that on
population,
their
or-
website, but that might be something we could reach out to DEQ and ask why some of these communities were triggered. Or it may be better to reach out to Redmond directly, just so we don't maybe let DEQ know we're getting ready to pay for an MS4, because I don't want to give them ideas. But we can reach out to individual cities that we can see their populations are less maybe, and follow back up with you on that.
Yeah, that would be helpful for myself to understand really how immediate the reality of it is, because I've heard about this and the mercury from Mike Bissett before I was even on council, and it's always been kind of said, well, it's coming, but is now the right time to put another fee on our citizens?
I might just stress that the regulatory requirements aren't really the main reason we need this. It's more about the actual system that's in place now, that's being used by the entire community, that, you know, has been in place for many decades and hasn't really had the proper maintenance that's needed. And things are going to continue to come up. I think Leland's got specific examples of areas that need work now that we just don't have funding for. And so, you know, it's been more of a reactionary maintenance program that we've been doing, because we don't have a capital plan and funding for keeping this system in place.
If you were to bring up Google Earth and look at Joe Dancer Park, and just to the northeast of Marsh Lane, you will see a rather large brown spot in the farmer's field. That happens to be a sinkhole over a 42-inch storm line that has a hole in the bottom of it that we can't get cameras down anymore because they'll disappear. That's just one of the small issues that we are facing in our storm system, because we just have not had funding to deal with these. And they're going to get worse if we don't get something started soon.
Yeah, thanks, Leland.
Additional context.
Shall we move on?
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
So just to let you know, in terms of the, back to the impervious area discussion, that in order to be able to estimate the fees and to then be able to bill the fees to non-residential customers, there is an effort underway to measure the impervious area of different parcels in the city. And impervious area is present, as you can see from these diagrams, rooftops, driveways, patios, private sidewalks, any of those areas that don't allow the infiltration of rainwater into the ground. And so once those estimates are completed, which will be pretty soon, I believe within the next month or so, then we'll have a much better basis for estimating what the rates would need to be per unit, because we'll have a sense as to what the non-residential component will be and the versus the residential component. Okay, Ann? This diagram just shows you, so one of the efforts that's already been completed is that estimating the average residential impervious area, which is about 3,500 square feet. And that was based on a random sample looking across the city of different types and areas, ages of housing stock. And so, again, that serves as potentially the basis for the uniform charge for residential properties, and then each of the larger non-residential properties would be based on its own estimated area. Okay, so last slide I have is just on the administrative side of things and the implementation, in addition to determining how much money we're trying to collect, putting the legal pieces in place and developing that rate structure, is just making sure that the administrative framework is there to support and implement the fee, which includes the financial systems, billing systems, starting, doing the public education for people around the fee, the need for the fee, that the infrastructure that exists today and what's coming down the road in terms of regulatory requirements. And then determining rate policies, any exemptions or discounts, like for low income, like you do on your other utility rates, and appeals procedures to make sure that everybody's placed in the right category and things like that.
Thank you, Deb. I'll just wrap up with this final slide about the next steps. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to advertise for the Project Advisory Committee that would cover both the stormwater and the wastewater projects, and select those members and hopefully hold an orientation meeting and get it kicked off next month. And we'd like to present what we're working on to the Affordable Housing and DEI committees and get their feedback. We'll return to council with recommendations for a stormwater utility after we have another work session as well. And then we would prepare an ordinance to establish the utility. And then for wastewater, we'll conduct the wastewater master plan rate and SDC review, and also present recommendations to council for the wastewater rates.
Thank you.
So that's it for the presentation.
Thank you. We're going to go into questions from councilors. I just would really quickly, at least for those councilors that are here with us, anybody that would be, as you all know, I'm working on council reassignments, anybody that would be interested in being on the Project Advisory Committee, if you could just give me a little hand up, just so I know if you have a specific interest in that. Great. Okay, thank you. So we'll go to questions from councilors. Councilor Chenoweth.
I don't know that I have any questions. I do have a couple of comments. One, I'm reticent, as I've well stated many times, on adding more fees. We've been having fee after fee after fee added to our residents over the last 5 years, and they're weary of what they've had to deal with. So I'm reticent to be in favor of adding even more. I would urge my fellow councilors not to, I heard the question regarding using this fee to fix the roads. I would urge us not to head down using this fee for any more than the maintenance of the actual stormwater system and things associated with the mandates being put on us by the state. And then the last comment I would make is that one of the things I've seen in the equitable movement is we come up with an amount of money that we want to raise. We set the price of what the fee is going to be based on what we're going to raise. Then we give discounts to those that are in lower incomes and unable to meet that. And so the pricing of what everybody else pays the other rate. The concern I have with that model is that middle America is getting squeezed pretty hard by all of these processes. And I don't know what the solution is to that. Upper incomes don't, $13 a month, $15 a month, they don't feel it. But every time we make adjustments to help the lower incomes in such a way that it ends up impacting the middle income every single time, that's putting quite a squeeze on middle America. So I would just like us to be cognizant of that in the process of creating this, and maybe think out of the box and how to accomplish avoiding doing that in this process. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Payne.
Thank you. I kind of have some similar sentiments to what Councilor Chenoweth is saying, especially with the lack of affordability of housing, and that we're already kind of struggling with that as a country, but as a city, and we're trying to tackle that also. So I guess a question I have as a result is, have there been any efforts to secure any funding, like grants through the EPA or HUD or DEQ or the EPA or whatever to begin this process?
Not to my knowledge yet.
And not to my knowledge either. I'm not aware of, off the top of my head, any programs for this sort of work, but we can certainly look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Menke.
I know that there was a number of water grants going out. It seemed like everybody was getting water grants. I assume that those grants were not moving over, or did not include these wastewater type of situations. No, or yes, or maybe.
I'm not familiar with that particular grant. If it was a water grant, it could have been related to floodplain.
Well, a lot of it just had to do with, a lot of cities did not have proper water, means of purifying water, et cetera.
Oh, okay. So that would probably be something separate than what we're looking at for
Right,
stormwater.
that's what I'm assuming. I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah. But we'll look into it. We'll see what we can find out.
Although I will echo my colleagues' sentiments, I realize that you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. I mean, regulation is regulation, and I do appreciate the fact that we're looking at it and at least approaching it as kindly as we can.
Thank you, Council President.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for some additional information when you come back as far as what it costs to administer this fee and what's going to be lost, and, you know, the cost of initial roll-up of software and then the ongoing cost annually. And just want to make sure that if we do go down this path, it's as efficient as possible and it's accomplishing what we're setting it out to accomplish. And although I do understand Councilor Chinowa's comments about roads, I do look at the roads as part of the stormwater system, because the worse condition they're in, the more water gets through them and not directed to the drains and things that are in the road system. And so a properly maintained road does help with the stormwater, from my understanding.
Thank you. I think I would echo what I'm hearing from the rest of my councilors, which is that this is kind of a conversation we're on repeat with, and but it's true in that we have decades of deferred maintenance in a variety of our facilities and systems, and the stormwater is our stormwater system's no exception from that. Mr. Koster, I have Google Earth pulled up. I'm looking for the sinkhole made by the stormwater drain that can no longer even be scoped. So, you know, these are the continual deferment of maintenance on literally the infrastructure that's keeping our city working is not reasonable to me, and I am also in the same boat of that we are dealing with lack of affordable or just lack of housing, period, and then the challenges we face as we continue to add costs. It's a very real thing, and I think that when we have those conversations, we need to be sure to pull back from them a little bit and think about how those costs really do impact not just our residents now, but also our future generations, our children and our children's children, much as many of us here are children of McMinnville that are trying to figure out how to fix the systems that have not been maintained or fixed for decades. So it is, as Councilor Menke said, a rock and a hard spot. I think that the council is fairly unified in that we don't have a desire to add additional costs to our residents and to keep the city functioning. We have to be able to pay for the infrastructure that allows us to be a good place to live and work. So this will be, I'm sure, a not easy conversation going forward, but I do believe that it'll be best had with good access to information. Is this project on iHeartMac.org currently? And if not, what's the timeline that it would join that platform so that the community can kind of follow along with the conversation?
Yeah, I don't think it's up there yet. We were going to do that all together when we set up the project advisory committee and start the outreach.
Okay, great. And what again was the timeline for starting the project advisory committee?
We're hoping to have it in place by the end of next month.
The end of next month. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I sent a note off to you about if there needs to be any formal action on the council liaison for the project advisory committee, and I'm hoping to do council reassignments at the beginning of next month, so it should meet your timeline as well. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us in person. Mr. Coster, did you want to add anything?
Just one quick comment. And with regards to a utility fund, just like wastewater, we won't fund road repairs. If we tear up a line underneath the road, of course, we'll patch the road and make it right. But this fund has to be dedicated to stormwater use, not road repair. What will benefit the roads is the money that's pulled out of the transportation fund right now to fund the street sweeping, to fund the leaf program, would go back to transportation, would no longer come out of there. So there's $350,000, $400,000 a year that would be back in the road service.
Yep, thanks for clarifying that, Leland.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons I'm saying I don't want to be using this money for that, is because we're already freeing up money by virtue of creating this. It would have been used out of the general fund. So to me, it's almost a double dip. I don't want to be too pejorative, but it's almost a double dip, so thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming in today. Nice to see you in person. We hope you feel better, Director Pagano, and we will take a 7-minute break and start the council session at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled council meeting, business meeting of the McMinnville City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask our city recorder, Claudia Cisneros, to do roll call, please.
Councillor Minke,
Present.
Councillor Chenoweth,
Present.
Councillor Payne,
Present.
Councillor Geary and Councillor Peralta are absent this evening. Council President Garvin. Mayor Drabkin.
Here. I would like to ask Councilor Payne to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Payne. Keep your thinking cap on over there on the creative funding ideas. I like it. Next, we have one proclamation this evening. This is our Lemonade Day proclamation. Hopefully you can join us this upcoming weekend, get out around town and support our young entrepreneurs. Whereas Lemonade Day is a fun, free, experiential learning program that launched in Houston, Texas in 2007 and has grown from 2,700 kids in one city to over 1 million kids in cities across America and Canada. And whereas there are 400 kids in McMinnville and surrounding communities who will be learning how to be young entrepreneurs by opening and operating their own businesses, a lemonade stand. And whereas the community's business leaders are supporting and encouraging these young entrepreneurs to be brave and do big things, and whereas since its inception, Lemonade Day has provided access to the experience of business ownership to youth from all walks of life, who learn lifelong skills and principles while learning how to make money, where they are encouraged to spend a little, save a little, and share a little. And whereas the mission of Lemonade Day is to empower today's youth to become tomorrow's entrepreneurs, now therefore I, Remy Drabkin, Mayor of the City of McMinnville, Oregon, do hereby proclaim Saturday, August 19th, 2023 as Lemonade Day McMinnville. We urge all citizens to recognize and encourage our kids' efforts as they learn about being young entrepreneurs while they open and operate their own businesses. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of McMinnville to be affixed this 8th day of August, 2023. Would you care to join us at all? Yeah, thank you. Do you want to say a few words, or? I said it all. Wonderful. Thank you. Come on up. Yeah, whatever you got.
Where's Lemonhead?
Where's Lemmy is the question? Oh, the proclamation. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. Here's your, here. You don't need the sign. Want to do a picture? Right. I have to take my baggy sweatshirt off.
my shoes.
All right, wonderful. We'll now move to comments from community members. Any interested audience members are invited to provide comments, and any comment provided that requires some type of follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing today or at some future date. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. If you wish to speak and you're on Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature to request to speak. And once your turn is up, we'll announce your name and unmute your mic, or you may send a chat directly to our city recorder, and she will announce you. Has anyone signed up for comment this evening?
Yes, we'll start with Heather Miller on Zoom.
Thank you. Welcome. Yep, okay.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Dropkin and councilors. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about Farmers Market, since it is National Farmers Market Week this week. So we have several things planned at the Downtown Farmers Market, including a raffle. Many of our vendors have donated items, and raffle tickets are $5. Last year's value of the basket was over $250. Those funds go back into the market to help with infrastructure improvements. So this year we were able to purchase 2 hand washing stations to have at the market, additional tables and chairs and tents. We'll also have some free giveaways for the kiddos. We have a photo booth. We have thank you cards to write to your favorite farmers to send them words of encouragement and thanks for growing delicious food throughout the year for us. Little history on our market. We were established in 2001 and have been going strong ever since. For the past 4 years, we've participated in the Double Up Food Box program, which is a federally funded program that provides additional dollars for SNAP recipients to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables from our farmers. Last year we facilitated $19,000 in additional funds to our community members, and our numbers this year as of the end of July are exceeding that number by $3,000. So we're looking to have a great year in providing healthy foods for our community. So we invite you all to come and help us celebrate this week and every week for that matter. Also want to thank the city for your partnership in the space that we're using, as well as First Baptist Church with their parking lot. Our MDA staff in helping to facilitate the market each week. We have an amazing MDA market intern this year, Gracie McKay, and she'll be with us again next summer helping to facilitate the Double Up Food Box program. And we've just been really grateful to have the expanded space to be able to provide nonprofit booths unlimited throughout the season. We've done a station for the city for one of your surveys, as well as the school district for kindergarten sign-up. So just wanted to share some exciting news from the market, and we hope to see you on Thursday.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing so much good news with us today. And do we have anyone else signed up?
Yes, next we have Kimberly Lady.
Hi, welcome. As you join us, please remember to state your name and address for the record.
My name is Kimberly Ladig. My address is 1015 Southwest Myrtle Court, McMinnville. I'm going to read a little thing I wrote. An event occurred on Thursday, July 20th, 2023 at Joe Dancer Park that I would like to make everyone here today aware of. I hope by sharing this event, I will promote a decision in favor of setting some boundaries to help further protect our children. My name is Kim Ladig. I'm a 25-year resident to Yamhill County, lifelong Oregonian, 10 years in McMinnville, and a single mother to a 6-year-old. I saved enough money to be able to afford to send my son to a local day camp for children ages 6 to 9 years old. It was $325 for my son to interact with 14 other kids from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m., Monday, July 17th until Friday, July 21st. I'd like to note that's equivalent cost-wise to an entire month's worth of groceries for a small family. The camp experience seemed fine each day at pickup, but the leaders of the camp had informed us parents about having to divert the kids off the forest paths due to safety reasons. On Thursday, July 20th at parent pickup, all parents were informed in person about the following incident. I'm going to paraphrase from a transcript of the incident provided to me by Daniel Coyle for the sake of time, the director of Coyle Outside, who partners with McMinnville and Chehalem Departments of Park and Recreation, which cover 28 different local parks. Quote, While traveling on a foot trail in the park of the forest, our group encountered a male adult on a bicycle traveling fast and with less notice to safely avoid contact. The instructor reported asking the bicyclist to travel more slowly or on foot when on the trails they were using. The instructor reported that the bicyclist complained that he was not at fault and that the group or its use of the trail was problematic. The instructor relayed that the interaction was not entirely appropriate in tone or language for camp participants to be witness to, but was otherwise not overtly threatening. Later in the same day, the group was on foot near a bridge in the park and encountered the same individual a second time. The individual was underneath the bridge and started shouting complaints towards the group while throwing leaves from out underneath the bridge. Nothing made contact with the group itself, the kids. At least one of the camp participants reported being hesitant and scared and wondering if this was similar to a troll like she had read about in stories. The instructor escorted the group away from the site and carried on with the camp without further incident. End quote. Now in all, an adult yelling at a group of young kids and throwing leaves at them seems harmless, but here are the things my son told me. The guy was yelling at us, saying we ruined his day, and he's very angry with us. There were needles and trash on the forest paths. I don't want to go to Joe Dancer anymore. I don't feel safe. A child of your community doesn't feel safe in our local parks. Many children don't feel safe, including those in my son's camp that day. Why is this acceptable? Why does a 6-year-old have to be familiar with drug paraphernalia to go to our local parks and avoid it?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony and your time today.
Can we get the rest of her letter, if she didn't finish, put into the record, please?
If she would like to provide that.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up for public testimony this evening?
That's everyone that signed up.
Okay. Would anybody in the gallery like to provide public testimony this evening? Okay. Would anybody on Zoom like to provide public testimony this evening? Is there anyone on the phone?
There is someone on the phone.
Would anyone on the phone like to provide public comment this evening? We are now going to look at our consent agenda. We have removed item F from your consent agenda, and we'll be coming back to that. Would any counselor request to have any other item removed from the consent agenda? I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
I have a motion from Counselor Menke
Second.
and a second from Counselor Chenoweth. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, say nay. And the consent agenda is unanimously approved. We'll now hear about the item removed from the consent agenda, resolution number 2023-50, a resolution awarding the professional services contract for the 30% design of the 3rd Street Improvement Project, project number 2023-4. We are going to go to Director Pagano on this, but I do just want to note again for the council that currently our request to the federal government to help fund this has made its way out of subcommittee with a recommendation for $850,000, and that has been carried forward by Congresswoman Salinas. Our request was for $4 million towards the project, but $850,000 is nothing to shake a stick at. So just now needs to make its way out of committee, and then of course the federal government has to fund itself, and we should be seeing $850,000 towards the project. But to the matter at hand, I'll hand this off to Public Works Director Ann Pagano, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. That's excellent news. Thanks for sharing that. We wanted to take this opportunity just to give you an update on the project and kind of just explain in summary what the resolution is for. First, I wanted to introduce, for those of you that may not know, Jeff Gooden. He should be there. I can't see who's in the audience there, but he's a project manager in our engineering division, and he'll be managing this project. Along with Jody Christensen from planning is also a project manager. They'll be assisting us from the planning department division. So we are moving into the design phase of the Third Street Improvement Project, and this resolution is for approval of the design contract and approval of additional funding to cover the design fees for 30% design. So it's basically preliminary design. So in March of this year, we put out a request for qualifications, and on April 28th, we received 3 proposals for the 30% or preliminary design, and the proposals were reviewed by our selection committee, and BKF Engineers was chosen to be the most qualified consultant. Then through scope negotiations and fee negotiations, it was determined that the cost of services provided by BKF will be $896,174.17 for this phase of the project. The adopted fiscal year 2024 budget includes $600,000 in ARPA allocated funds and $185,000 in urban renewal funds. So that leaves $111,174.17 that we are requesting additional dollars that were set aside for ARPA projects. This overage in budget is due to increases in costs since the original estimates were prepared. It's been 2.5, almost 3 years since those estimates were prepared. And for schedule, the project is expected to reach 30% design in about 1 year, or August 2024. After that, we will be looking to apply for potential grants, and it sounds like we may have one already. Thank you, Mayor. To complete the construction documents and also to build the project. As of now, we do not expect to break ground on this project any sooner than 2026. if everything goes well. So with that, we welcome any questions and recommend that you approve the resolution.
Thank you. Look to council for any questions. Not hearing any, I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2023-50, a resolution awarding the professional services contract for the 30% design of the 3rd Street Improvement Project, project number 2023-4.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Chenoweth, a second from Councilor Menke. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The resolution has passed unanimously. We'll now move into our ordinances for the evening. We are now going to consider the first reading with a possible second reading of ordinance number 5137. Does any member of the council need to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest or recuse themselves regarding this ordinance? We will now consider the matter of ordinance number 5137. Does any councilor object to having the ordinance read by title only? Will our interim city attorney, Walt Gowell, please read the ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 5137, an ordinance amending titles 2.50 Code Compliance and 8.10 Public Nuisances of the McMinnville Municipal Code.
Thank you. I'll now call on Heather Richards, our Community Development Director, to present.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. And Nick Miles, our lead code compliance officer, is with me as well. So the code amendments you have in front of you do two things. One, the proposed amendments to Chapter 2.50 allows our code compliance program to go into a more expedient administrative process of compliance for those properties that are habitual property nuisances. So there are some properties in the community which unfortunately we are in code compliance with seasonally and regularly that have the same nuisances on them, and we'd like to be able to get at those properties more quickly than we can with the current process, and Nick can talk you through that a little bit more. And then the Chapter 8.10 amendments are housekeeping amendments in our nuisance chapter. We adopted that a couple of years ago, and with practice in terms of implementing it, we have some recommendations as to how to make it clearer for both staff and the community resident as to what the intentions of those particular nuisances are.
Thank you. Any council discussion or questions? Okay, not hearing any, I'll ask for a motion to pass ordinance number 5137 to a second reading.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilor Menke
Second.
and a second from Council President Garvin. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Motion has passed unanimously. Ordinance number 5137 passes on its first reading unanimously. I will now ask the interim city attorney, Walt Gowell, to read the ordinance again by title only.
Ordinance number 5137, an ordinance amending titles 2.50, code compliance, and 8.10, public nuisances of the McMinnville Municipal Code.
Thank you, and I am going to call for a little council discussion before asking for a motion. Council President?
Yeah, Nick or Heather, in the ordinance, there's 4 addresses cited in that. And 3 of them have identical amount of liens, and then the other one's a lot higher. And is that just because of its continued problematic, and you guys have had to engage them multiple times, or?
So I think, Counselor, are you referencing the resolution that had the liens?
Yeah, correct.
And so you're pointing out that maybe one of those properties could be one of the habitual properties, an example of a habitual nuisance that we're dealing with?
Yeah, so
Okay.
you called out, discarded motor vehicles on one, and the Davis one is, from the description and the packet, I just don't see why it's 4 times as much. I was just wanting some additional context on that.
Okay, I'll let Nick answer that. I just want to clarify for the record, though, what's in front of you is an ordinance for code amendments, and the resolution for the liens was part of the consent agenda.
Gotcha.
Councilor Gavin, in regards to the Davis Street property with the higher amount of citations, that's a property that we had not abated in the past, but had issued citations to in the past at a lower level. So being a habitual nuisance property, we cited them a little bit more heavily and more frequently this time around. So whereas the other ones, you see that $250 level on average, the $1,000 represents us going out, multiple times over the course of a month, so to speak. So we stack them a little bit more to see if that motivates them to take care of the issues without us having to come in and do an abatement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? No. Okay.
I guess I have a question, but it's maybe,
I just want to make sure it's we're on the ordinance.
yeah. Yeah, I'm reading it. I don't know anybody who has graffiti on their property that permits, allows, or causes it to be graffitied. So I guess I struggle with that because our neighborhood gets graffitied a lot. And the park gets graffitied a lot, and there's a lot of fences that back up to that park. And holding the homeowners accountable for the outside of their fence where it borders city
I'm
property.
going to call out that where you are, page number, so the council can follow along.
187 in the packet.
Thank you.
It's item number, or code 8.10.220.
So when we put together the nuisance code, there are a couple of nuisances in the nuisance code that some people may say is not, that the property owner isn't creating the nuisance. However, the nuisance is occurring on the property owner's property. And so that's, in terms of the ability to abate it, we are working with the property owner in terms of the abatement piece of it. The criminal piece of it is done through the police department. With the graffiti program, Nick's been really successful propping up a graffiti removal program with volunteer activities every weekend in McMinnville, working with private property owners who are getting their fences tagged and our public facilities to go in and abate that graffiti as quickly as possible. I think one of the reasons that we want to make the amendment tonight to the code is we have to notice the property owner that the nuisance exists on their property, and that we need to go into an abatement process with it. However, graffiti attracts graffiti. So the quicker we can remove it, the better, because then we are eliminating the attraction for more graffiti. And so that's why we wanted to make the amendment in the code in terms of the timeliness for removal. But Nick works, both Nick and I should say Darcy Reynolds is our other code compliance officer, work with property owners when there's graffiti involved with their property on different programs and processes to get it abated. And they've worked with them in both businesses around town to help get discounted products to help them remove the graffiti.
So if I could recap, what I understand the change to the code as it relates to graffiti is not the addition of any properties, but it is the removal of if the graffiti has remained for at least 10 days. So the change in the code that's being sought is specifically to saying that it's demanding, it's that if graffiti is present, so that there is no time clock in which we have to mark the graffiti is there, and then return in 10 days in order to be able to work with the property owner on getting the graffiti removed. That's my interpretation, is that this change in code allows code compliance to immediately approach the property owner and say, there is graffiti on your property, we need to get it removed, as opposed to, there is graffiti on your property, here's written notification, we'll come back in 10 days, et cetera. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes.
Yep.
I guess, so when you're talking about somebody who lives who is bordering a public property or public right-of-way or something, who maybe doesn't see that space, what's that conversation like, I guess, is maybe more the question. Are you going to them and saying, hey, there's graffiti on the side of your fence, on the opposite side of your fence, perhaps an area where you're not seeing, like, somebody who doesn't have children isn't going to know the opposite side of their fence in the park doesn't have graffiti.
Mm-hmm. And those are the most challenging graffiti conversations to have, because it's the most extreme, realistic example of a property owner, not being responsible whatsoever for the issue or causing the issue. And so, like Heather mentioned, those are situations where we really work hard to find some volunteers, gather supplies, so that we aren't burdening that property owner with the cleanup responsibility as much. That being said, the fence was constructed by the developer or the homeowner, and so ultimately it is their property to abate. If they aren't interested in having us bring volunteers onto the property or from the park side to take care of it, then we would be relying on them to do that. So at this time, I'm not aware of any resources or programs that Parks Maintenance has to support that from their side of things. Although it would be park users that might be doing the tagging. So we really just try to soften the blow by letting them know, hey, at any given Saturday, we've got volunteers ready to come out and help you out. So let us know.
So I guess that's my question is that conversation occurring when you're advising people that these property boundaries and privacy barriers are getting tagged? Are you saying, here's some solutions?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I can give plenty of examples of park areas around town where that's occurring. The linear park trail, we've got the area along Meadows that's been hit pretty hard. There's the small park off of Morgan Lane. There's lots of areas where that's occurring, and we've had volunteers out 5 or 6 weekends just dedicated to helping on those park sides of private property fences.
5 or 6 weekends just working on those. How many graffiti cleanups overall do you think you've led?
So we've had groups of volunteers out every weekend since whatever the first weekend in June was. So I don't have the data right there in front of me, but every weekend since June, we've had folks out with brushes and spray removal and paint. So.
And that's when the program launched, right? It was the first week of June, and it's a new program for the city.
Yep, and it'll carry through the first week of September. It might go a little bit longer depending on if we get a few more volunteers wanting to get in before school season's back in and all of that. But I'd say anecdotally, the impact from the park side of private property has been a big motivator to try to get some volunteers and supplies going, because those are tough conversations to have, and it's no one likes to see it happen. So if we can try to ease the pain a little bit, we're doing as much as we can.
Do you have additional questions or concerns, Counselor?
No, I think I need to join the graffiti cleanup party.
There you go.
Excellent.
Mayor?
Yes,
if I
Counselor
might,
Chenoweth.
Since we happen to be on this page, I think we have a grammatical error on that particular page. I think you need open quotes, the beginning quotes for both 1 and 2. You got closed quotes, but no open quotes or beginning quotes.
All right.
For B1 and 2,
For
is that what
graffiti,
you're referencing?
for the word graffiti,
Yeah.
and for the word graffiti, the grouping of graffiti nuisance property.
Okay,
Both of them.
thank you.
Yep.
Council President?
2 things. One being on the graffiti subject, or as far as graffiti removal, are we just for cleanup, are we painting over it, or are we pressure washing and using a chemical process, or are we using dry ice blasting, or what's
It's going to depend a lot on the surface. In a lot of scenarios, the graffiti has been applied to some fences that wouldn't hold up very well to any pressure washing or sandblasting. So in those cases, we're working with RADA and we're taking over photos to try to match a paint sample. We've got probably 4 or 5 shades of a generic brown that's worked well. We also have purchased some chemical applications that we've been able to use on roll-up garage doors, street signs. We have done some pressure washing on some retaining walls. So it's a mixed bag. But I will say primarily we're, from the volunteer side of things, we're using a lot of paint. And when we engage with property owners and they're asking for advice, that's what we're suggesting. Unless someone has a brand spanking new fence, they might be out there sanding it down themselves. We've seen that happen.
okay? And
So
then-
it's the code doesn't define how it gets removed or covered. So it's, we've had one person in particular, she didn't necessarily remove the graffiti. She embellished her own artwork around the graffiti and changed it to more of a mural. So yeah, we try to be really flexible.
And as far as our non-local partners, like ODOT traffic control boxes that get graffitied, who's in charge of cleaning that up, and have they been responsive to that? Because it seems like graffiti on those traffic control boxes seem to stick around a little bit longer than other spots.
Yeah, so with the graffiti, I'll just reiterate that we, in code compliance in general, we operate from a complaint basis. So when we do get those complaints, especially about the ODOT ones, we work with, I'm going to blank on his last name, but Ryan, he's a maintenance supervisor at the local ODOT yard. So there's a couple of electrical box or light control boxes on 99 that he'll have folks go out and clean same day if we hear about them. But again, we need to get the complaints. We aren't necessarily going out to look for it.
Okay, thank you, Nick. That's all I have for graffiti. Down a page, we're talking about noise. It doesn't appear that there's any edits in that from my reading, but last time this came before us, it seemed like we shortened that up to the 8 p.m. And I was curious if you get much for noise complaints. I know that's outside of your normal working hours, but do we hear from the commercial community that they wish they could work a little bit longer in the summertime or start earlier when it's hot out like it is right now from a employee safety standpoint? Or are we hearing from homeowners that commercial zones are too noisy next to their residential properties, things like that?
This time of year, it's not uncommon for us to get at least a few inquiries, not necessarily complaints, but inquiries from either local builders or homeowners that are doing projects, wanting to know how late they can go. So it's nice to see that be a little bit more proactive. And in terms of enforcement or documentation, we work pretty well with the police department. If there are issues that occur after hours or on the weekends, they can kind of back us up and do a drive-by if we've got a chronic barking dog issue overnight, or a residence or a business that might be a little louder than they should be. But in general, we aren't hearing too much about isolated incidences. I will say we get a fair amount of complaints about groundskeeping at Winco and Walmart. Both of their parking lots are cleaned and maintained, between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. when there's no traffic. And they've got the Grand Haven neighborhood just to the north of them. So that's been a little bit of a challenge trying to accommodate the commercial side of things. They're trying to clean when they can, also being adjacent to that residential area. So there's a little bit of friction there.
I know that leaf blower well.
Yep.
And I would say, Councilor Garvin, under number 11 of the noise code, you'll see where it says commercial establishments adjacent to residential property. The quiet hours are from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Yeah, I did notice that. Thank you for calling that out, Heather. All right, that's all I had for questions. If the time constraints seem to be working for the community, then I'd rest my case.
Additional questions or concerns? Thoughts? Okay. In that case, I would ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 5137. The motion from Council President and a second from Councilor Menke. All those, and I would ask the city recorder to poll the council, please.
Councilor Menke?
Aye.
Councilor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Councilor Payne?
Aye.
And Council President Garvin.
Ordinance number 5137 is adopted by a vote of 4-0. And we're now going to go to department head reports and reports from councilors on committees and board assignments. So starting with council reports, I'll start on my right. Councilor Menke.
Okay. I'm sitting here pondering what we did at the last Affordable Housing Committee meeting. Well, it appears that I am now the chair of the Affordable Housing Committee, and Vicki Weibargen is now the vice chair, and Remy Kibitz is alive. It's sort of like your worst nightmare, but what can I say? We had a long discussion. We basically went through our goal list, and actually we have achieved many of the goals. And our top items, and this was a long discussion of what we thought was the most important to work on this year, were community land trusts and land, community land and land banking. And then I think the other one was density bonuses. Does that sound right? Yeah. For some reason, that's the only one that's leaping out at me. Heather?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so those were the chosen ones. There was a report out from Katie Curry and Carrie Martin, both doing some research on a separate subcommittee on affordability models and things like that. Both were interesting discussions. And that's what I have for that. I guess the other committee I'm on is YCAP, and I guess the big news for YCAP is we're hoping September 1st they will officially take over the Providence turnkey operation. That's been in the process. It's not absolutely certain, but they think that's probably when it will happen. And that's what I've got.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
For your first committee, Affordable Housing Task Force, subcommittee, sorry.
Yeah.
I know that I could look online, but sometimes there's a disconnect between online and what's happening. Are there any openings currently on that committee?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you.
Why, are you interested?
I know somebody who is.
Okay, well, give me their name.
They can always attend. Great. Councilor Payne.
Thank you. The Local Public Safety Coordinating Council is not meeting again until August 30th, tentatively. So I will have more on that later. And Landscape Review did not meet. Their meeting was canceled for too short of an agenda on July 17th. So we will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow? Next Wednesday. Soon. So nothing to report.
All right, thank you, Councilor Chenoweth.
We're still in the polling process of determining what the goals and objectives will be for the MEVLC, sorry. Parkway has not met.
Thank you. And Council President?
Thank you, Mayor. No YCOM meeting today, or didn't meet in July either. Our next meeting will be in September, which I believe we'll probably dive into a lot of separating city YCOM dues to McMinnville Fire District dues, to that formation, and no Airport Commission meeting, and Visit McMinnville meets next week on the 16th. Other than that, I look forward to seeing anybody who's attending the watershed tour tomorrow.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, jumping off from that, tomorrow we're pleased to be hosting a watershed tour. We have 27 participants coming. It's mostly elected leadership for representation from our area. So our representative Elmer will be in attendance. Representative Scharf from our neighboring district will be in attendance. A number of councilors will be in attendance. At least one member of our county commission will be in attendance. And we know that we have a representation not only from our council president, but also from other members of the new fire board that will be in attendance. And so we're really excited, and mayors and city managers from surrounding cities. So we're really excited to share about our utility, to talk about regional collaboration, and make sure that our surrounding communities know the resources that are available to them, and how we can collaborate. For instance, as you may have all recently read, Amity had a boil water notice. We want them to know that they could have called us and we could have brought in one of our emergency trailers and filtered water. So we're looking forward to being able to not only go up into the watershed, talk about what we're doing up there in terms of the forestry, the water collection, the water treatment, but also the other broader opportunities that are available to us regionally. In addition to that tour, Congresswoman Salinas will be coming to do a very brief small business tour on August 22nd. So I'm just confirming the 4 businesses that will be stopping in, where we'll have 10 minutes per business for the business owner to talk with the Congresswoman, but we will do that. As earlier reported, she's carried our request forward, and it has made it out of subcommittee, so hopefully we'll be the recipients of about $850,000 towards our future infrastructure needs. And we are starting the work of planning for the short session as well, and also are hoping to have a collaborative approach with that, and working with our state rep as we discuss what our different options are for putting together some good collaborative efforts, and moving forward. And I think that is a good summation for me today. We'll now go to department head reports, and I will start with our city manager on Zoom, Jeff Towery.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on Zoom with department heads to start. So Community Development Director Heather Richards.
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works Director Ann Pagano.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Interim City Attorney Walt Gowell.
Also nothing to report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Finance Director Jennifer Cuellar.
I'm going to break the string, sorry. So On your agenda and included in your packet was some information about an update on our negotiations with Comcast for our our cable franchise renewal process. And so I just wanted to go over a couple of points, and we've got on the line our attorney, Nancy Werner, who's assisting us in this effort. So if there are any questions or comments she wants to make that I missed in my little introduction, she's here as a resource as well. So as you may recall, back in December, we talked about the need of negotiating new franchise agreements because they were coming to a close. And at this point, we have further extended the deadline of when we would like to have this completed in mid-September. But unfortunately, just the work back and forth has been going pretty slowly. And 2 weeks ago, on July 26th, we got an actual proposal from Comcast asking whether we wanted to consider tabling the renewal effort for 5 years and just doing an extension. So that's why we wanted to do this update with you guys. We've talked with folks from Comcast, and I don't believe anyone's on the line at the meeting, but they were aware and hoped to maybe have someone available. So our recommendation as staff is to keep moving forward with the negotiation. We believe that the areas where there are differences are not that significant in number, and that we believe it's in the interest of the community and in general to go ahead and finish what we've started and complete the franchise renewal process. So I included some data in terms of how revenues are going and some of the negative impacts at this point. The most pronounced is around the way our PEG fees, so those are the dollars that support the cable, what is it called? MCM, the folks who bring us this meeting, thanks, the Community Access Television Station. Their access to dollars to fund their capital expenditures and their capital planning are based on subscribers, and that's really taking a tumble in terms of numbers.
Yes, it is. They're significantly impacted by it, and somehow we need to figure out a way to improve that situation.
Right, so there just are a number of topics that we're wanting to get through, and delaying 5 years just would continue to put added pressure on our community access cable partners at MCM in particular. So Nancy, do you have any other details that you think we should share or that I missed that we've discussed?
I don't think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor Drapkin and Council. I won't take up your time. I echo everything that Jennifer said. In the discussions with Comcast so far, I don't see anything that appears to be a stumbling block. I think that we will be able to reach an agreement that will be acceptable to the city and to Comcast. It's just taking a little longer. People have different workloads, we can't really always make things go the way we want them to go. But I don't think it's an issue of just not being able to reach agreement. So it'll take a little longer than we hoped, but being that it's a long-term agreement, I think we really want to make sure it's protecting the city. And Jennifer kind of mentioned one of the issues, which is the PEG funding. We also want to make sure that all the residents of the community are going to be able to have access to these services that they want and need. So I think it's worth spending the time to get this done as soon as we can, and certainly not putting it off for 5 years, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any additional or any questions or comments from the council? Okay, I also would be in favor of not delaying contract negotiation when we're out of contract for 5 years. I would kind of look for, we don't have any formal action on this, so I just kind of look around for general sentiment for staff to be able to go and continue that work. Councilor Chenoweth?
Yeah, I'll just voice, I don't, unless they gave a real compelling reason to wait, I wouldn't want to wait. We've already invested lawyer dollars to this point that would have to be restarted, and I'm not interested in doing that. So.
Yeah, I would echo Councilor Chenoweth's thoughts, as well as, setting this off the table for 5 years, I think sets a bad precedent for our other franchise agreements, and I'm not interested in opening that door.
I agree.
I agree. There's no reason to, and I think we voted on this in our consent agenda, didn't we?
Separate.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think you have the general direction of the council. Speaking of lawyers' fees, I'm so sorry that I skipped over advice and information earlier where it was presented in the agenda and kept you on the phone here. So many mea culpas here. But that is the last, is there anything else, or you have what you need?
We're good, and just, be aware, we likely will come before you for another formal extension, so it doesn't go out of contract again.
Great, thank you. And Claudia Cisneros, City Recorder.
Yes, I have a few dates that I want to just let the public know for August. August 28th at 7 p.m., we'll have a joint work session with the McMinnville School Board District at the district office. And then August 29th at 9 a.m., we'll have a joint work session or special called meeting with MAC Water and Light, and this one will be via Zoom only.
And anticipate no more than 15 to 30 minutes. This is just for us to formalize the agreement we already came to in the last joint session.
And these are all on your calendars already, just wanted to state it for the record.
Thank you. Okay, not hearing anything else, I will adjourn the city council meeting at 7:52 p.m. Thank you so much.